Thank you for welcoming me.
On one hand, Vladimir Putin, through his invasion of Ukraine, has managed to unify the NATO alliance like no one has ever been able to do in the last few decades. And not only has he unified the alliance, he is guaranteed that we'll bring 2 new members in, Finland and Sweden. And then on top of that, of course, he's pushed Ukraine closer into the EU orbit. He's pushed Ukraine into the NATO orbit as well. So at the strategic level, I think it has been helpful to the alliance. That said, Putin's actions remind us that Russia is very dangerous, that we cannot trust them to live up to their obligations, their commitments, and we have to continue to refresh and rebuild the NATO deterrent capabilities. And that means doing what it takes to make sure we have sufficient defensive capability and capacity. Well, I've always felt that the United States forces should have moved east after the Cold War, following the movement of our expansion of the alliance eastward toward Russia. And so it's clear that the frontline states are the ones most concerned, most vulnerable, if you will, to Russian aggression. So you think about the Baltic countries, Romania, Poland, etc. That's why I've always felt it's important to make sure we have an American presence forward. And by the way, you have the UK, the Germans, and others forward as well to deter any type of Russian bad behavior. American leadership is very important, not just in the world, but not just in Europe, but globally. So I think it's vitally important we have U.S. leadership, and that means that we have to have a presence on the ground. You probably don't know, but I served in NATO as a young Army officer in Europe in the 1990s. So I'm familiar with the landscape. I'm familiar with how the alliance works, and it only works when you are working every day, shoulder to shoulder, side by side with your NATO allies and partners. So it's critical that American leadership is there and that it's visible and it's forward. Lithuania and the other Baltic states have shown us the importance of courage and resolve and a willingness to defend their sovereignty and their freedom. That's the first most important thing. But then second, of course, is to continue to make the investments in your own defensive capability and capacity so that you can deter Soviet or Russian aggression. And then I think it's continued leadership with regard to Ukraine. I think the Baltic states have punched above their weight, if you will, when it comes to supporting Ukraine. All that sends the right signals to the United States and to other countries that Lithuania and its neighbors are fully behind the NATO alliance and are willing to also share in the commitments. And I think that's very important for all of us. NATO's Article 5 commitment is steadfast, it's ironclad, and nothing's going to change that. We know that we owe up to our alliances, we meet our commitments, but we also realize that what's happening right now is not just a war between Russia and Ukraine, it's a war between autocracy and democracy. And if we don't stop it now, it's only going to spread, which is why if it were to happen with a NATO ally, we have to fight the Russians. We'd have to be sure that we're prepared to push back and defeat them as necessary to defend the democracies of the world. That's the most important thing in this 21st century.